Thank you so much, everyone. We deeply apologize for the little glitch that we had. We had some technical difficulties with YouTube, so we had to improvise and move to Zoom. Basically, today's topic, hunger, habits, and hormones, understanding overeating. So Dr. Hafiz has graciously given us a lot of time in the past, and he has been talking about a lot of these topics. He's a physician, he's based out of New York, and he basically specializes in nutrition and diet. Um, and the topics that we've discussed in the past were very deeply rooted in scientific, for the lack of better word, scientific jargon. And so Feesby has made sure that it's going to be very friendly in terms of people being able to understand the literature that is being shared on these slides. And really, I'm very grateful to Hafizbai for doing this. A lot of people have come forward, and have, said very nice things about these presentations. Yes, Hafizbai will be taking questions at the end of the session. So please, if you have any questions, please note them down while he's presenting. So once the presentation ends, then we can go ahead and we can ask those questions. So in the meantime, if I can request everyone to please mute your mics because we can still hear people talking in the back. Please mute your mics and we can start with this presentation today. So today's topic, hunger, habits, and hormones. We've basically try to do this topic specifically because of Ramadan starting in 8 days, and so we will be embracing Ramadan in 8 days, and so that topic aligns with some of the eating habits that are very difficult to give up. Dr. Hafiz knows this more than anyone else on this forum today. He sees patients every day, and he helps with weight loss. He helps with people doing exercises, people suffering from sedentary lifestyle, very bad eating habits, and most importantly, the poison that Dr. Hafiz has been talking about for a long time, sugar. Sugar is the poison that is very predominant in our society. And so that's something that we have to fight every day, living in America, especially because the food industry is basically rigged against us as far as sugar goes. So without further ado, I'm going to invite Dr. Hafiz to please start the presentation and enlighten us with his knowledge today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, my dear brother. You are not only a true brother, but also a great supporter of this cause. And I understand this, that why you are interested in this too, because you have a young family, plus you're a scientist yourself, and you know that there is a science behind it. This is really, and my idea of going after this topic from where I never came out, actually, because such a vast topic, was to help as many people as I can. Because I was, as a clinician, sick and tired of writing scripts and writing scripts for every single symptom that came in. And because this is how we are trained in med school, this is what we do. You have cholesterol, here is the pill. You have blood pressure, here's the pill. You have diabetes, here is the medication. But the root cause of all this problem has never come across minds of many of the clinicians and practicing professionals. And as a result, we have suffered worldwide, and especially in this country, a lot. And I want to make sure that we understand this topic. And today is going to be basically a non-scientific layman term that we're going to talk about this and try to have people understand what is going on, what should be our defense, and then above and beyond, if we get sick, well, that's why there is medical community, right? This is the reason. But without having the true understanding of this issue, we are seeing sick and sick people with no result. It's like an everlasting dilemma that we find ourselves in. So the thing is that, so there are, you know, there is a thing called hunger. That is, there is no doubt about it. And there is a thing that's called eating out of habit. And there is a thing that what happens to when we eat, what does our body do with it? All that is an important topic. Now, there is a possibility that when we don't eat for several hours, we get hungry. Simply, there are signals in the body that signal the brain and indicate that we're hungry. So we got to understand that majority of what happens from the mouth to the cellular level has hormonal input. Without hormones, the food that we consume cannot be converted into useful things in our body. So this is the main understanding and talking point, a base where we will talk today. If we look at it nowadays, we will come across this thing that people generally think that they are obese because, I mean, people that see obese people, they think that it is all about overeating. It is all about overeating. These people are just all the time eating. But it is not that simple. Obesity is has a lot to do with eating more than what we should. But there are cases where it has nothing to do with overeating, but rather what we eat that causes fat deposits in the body, and that causes an everlasting vicious cycle from where we find it hard to come out. Now, obesity has a genetic predisposition too. There is no doubt about it. But many a times, an obese family has similar type of eating tendencies and habits that goes through the generation, and generation after generation people learn a certain way of eating, and unfortunately majority of the time those foods that are being learned from childhood are the very food that are the cause of obesity and overweight. And we got to understand that. How can we define obesity? Is obesity equal to metabolic syndrome? Well, metabolic syndrome is a state where body is unable to process our food into important tissue, into glucose, into energy, into ATP, all that. All that does not take place when there is a metabolic syndrome. Its synonymous word would be insulin resistance, meaning that your body makes a hormone from the pancreas, beta cells of your pancreas, in response to mainly carbohydrates, and then it goes out into the circulation and tell the tissues to uh, take the glucose that's circulating and process it for energy. But remember, glucose is the energy of life. It is a substrate that all cells in the body use, and they do not need insulin to get that glucose in except fat tissues. So when we have a situation where we have a high circulating glucose and it is not being taken up by the tissues, then that extra glucose is very dangerous for the body and it causes endothelial damage. And as a result of this, the body sends insulin to convert that particular glucose into fat, because fat, in short words, is an energy for the future. But that never happens. What happens is that that time never comes for people to stop burning fat, because there is a never time that there is a gap between intake and the fat burning. So you got to understand that concept before we could go any further. So remember, there are three nutrients, main macronutrients that we consume. Those are carbohydrates, those are proteins, and those are fats. Now, consider carbohydrates and fats as energy, and consider proteins as building blocks, because that's how it was meant to be from the nature, the way human body was created. The fats and the carbohydrates are for ATP production, for energy, and proteins should be considered for building blocks. But that does not happen because our bodies react differently to these based on what is happening inside our bodies. And that's what we need to understand. So the main hormone
There was
that
a king and
causes
got
or
married.
decides that if your body will make out of a nutrient a fat, or will make out of a nutrient that you just consume a building block or a fat deposit, would depend on this single hormone, which is called insulin. Insulin comes out when we consume mainly carbohydrates, or when we take certain proteins, the certain amino acids, which are, I abbreviated it for LIV, LIV, mean leucine, isoleucine, and valine. Those essential amino acids trigger insulin, but fats do not trigger insulin release, and all other proteins, all other amino acids largely do not trigger insulin. It's the carbohydrates. And now we got to understand that, do we really need carbohydrates? And the answer would be no. In reality, no, because our body can convert proteins and fats into a glucose from within our body and take it for energy usage. So this day and age, with this refined approach to the food and ready-made food available, we gotta go to supermarket and realize the majority of this packaged food that is available today are carbohydrates. Why? Because they're easy to package. They are quick to make, but they are very dangerous for our body. And the carbohydrates that are good for us, those are not available in packaged food or foods that are processed. Why? Because they removed fiber from it. Fiber was the one that was keeping that particular carbohydrate encased in itself. And when we consume it, it makes sure that there is no rapid uptick in the glucose so that the body will get overwhelmed and release insulin. So we got to make sure as subjects, as human beings, that we got to do whatever it takes in our power for insulin to not come out unnecessarily, a lot more, and stay in our body a lot longer than we need it, because that's where the problem lies. So, so yeah, so we in the medical community, we have been um, describing obesity through a parameter called BMI, which is weight against our height. And we have used it for almost 3-4 decades. It is an outdated term. It does not really define obesity very well. And as a result, the target is missed. And we never reach to our target. We can never help our patients because we continue to believe that the BMI is high. And actually, there are a lot of subjects, there are a lot of human beings that have a high BMI, but they're perfectly healthy. And Arnold Schwarzenegger, who is one of those bodybuilders, is a perfect example of that. However, new science indicates that if we were to pay attention to BRI, which is body round index, we will be able to target the obesity pandemic, and we will be able to help our patients in much better way. And those people that are not medical doctors or medical professionals, they can understand that too. Now, this is a measurement of your belly right above your navel. And if you measure that, generally speaking, for men over 40 inches, and for women over 35, then you have a high BRI. And that is a real sign of internal obesity. That is the fat that's most active, by the way. So we got to understand that the fat that's around the organs, that is in the liver and or around the organs in our body, is the most toxic fat that is producing inflammatory cytokines, which means inflammatory chemicals in the body that causes a compounding effect on our health. It causes our insulin not to work properly. It causes our other hormones not to work properly. And as a result, we could never win the race against obesity unless we understand this concept of BRI and try to work around to see how we could burn it. Now, many people want beach bodies. Sorry for the expression. They want perfect bodies. They want, and that's their goal. But unfortunate thing is that majority of the people don't understand that the fat that you see around, hanging, visible, is called subcutaneous fat. Believe it or not, that fat is inert, biochemically speaking, up to 22 pounds in the body. The fat that's internal that we are talking, which BRI measures, is toxic, starts toxicity or being toxic to the body at 5 pounds only. And the fat in the liver, half a pound. So liver gets first excess fat in the liver, and as a result, liver is unable to clear the toxins. It is unable to produce certain useful hormones, clotting proteins. It is unable to make a useful compound called glycogen, which helps us with the storage form of glucose during the fasting times. All that liver is unable to do. And as a result, this fat that's in the liver and around the organs, which collectively only 5.5, as I said, half a pound in the liver and only a 5 pound in the outside the liver, in the internal or around the internal organs, is enough to create the problem. If we can handle that, if we control that, we will control obesity. I assure my patients and my listeners that if we control that BRI, we can have healthy bodies. I mean, I would not promise you that you will have a beach body. You could get fairly good and healthy and feel good about it. And that should be your target to achieve. So with that understanding, we could go to the next slide. Now, there are people, and yesterday I saw a patient who was very proud. He says, "Hey, doc, I eat everything and I don't get fat." And I said, "Really?" I was almost 100% sure that if I put my POCUS, point of care ultrasound, on him, on his liver, I would find fatty liver there. Because the bad food, the bad carbohydrates, processed carbohydrates, they're not going anywhere, whether you're thin or whether you are big or obese. That is causing you damage. Because in excess, even though you might have a faster metabolic rate than others, for which there are examples, but your body will most likely be suffering from internal fat, which is what we are talking about. All right. Now, there are people that are obese, but they are metabolically healthy, like I said. They just have a hanging fat. It's just the way they are genetically born. They have some genetic component. There are some populations that have that kind of makeup. And as a result, quite frankly, there are about 20% of those obese people that are actually very healthy, metabolically very healthy. And yet, you have these thin people that continue to attack these obese people, that they are the problem. But the reality is there's these silent people, silent thin from outside, fat inside people that are causing most amount of dollars spent on healthcare today. Next. So this is one of those slides that I have covered before, but quickly I would again go. This is the fat, guys, that we are talking about that we need to go after. This yellow material that's around your organ in this picture right in front of you. See, the subcutaneous fat, which is around, close to the skin, we're not talking about it. We're talking about this fat that's inside. That fat we are unable to see, but is running, is creating havoc in the body. And where the fat is coming from? Carbohydrates. You name it, it is coming from them. Now, many people say that I'm against carbohydrates. No, I'm not against carbohydrates. I'm against bad carbohydrates. That's the difference. Okay? I'm not against fruits and vegetables. There's only one fruit that I tell people not to consume this day and age, and that is because it is not the same fruit as it used to be back in the time of our ancestors, and that's called grapes because they are modern day candies now, unfortunately. Very little amount of fiber and a lot of fructose. So and people have tendency to eat a large volume of grapes before satisfying themselves, and that's one of the fruits that I say. But otherwise, I am pro fruits, I am pro vegetables. You know why? Because they both got fiber. What does fiber do? Well, one thing I tell you today, that the fiber is the single most blessing that the God has created in our carbohydrates that he naturally created for us, by the way. But what did we do? We removed the best thing out of what he created for us, and we left what is not good for us, generally speaking, and we started eating them. Well, we do not, in our human body, we do not have the capacity to digest fiber. So here's an interesting thing. So why would God create fiber in these things? Well, because God, in his infinite wisdom, knew that we have something within our bodies that will be able to consume it. That is not our body, but it's another body that we are carrying within our bodies, and that's called bacteria. Bacteria are part of our life. They recycle. Bacteria are part of our mitochondria. Mitochondria are those energy units in our cells that cause ATP production. So that fiber is for them. And they outnumber us. For human cells, 10 trillion to 100 trillion cells, they outnumber us by that much margin. That is their food that we are taking in, because they have those enzymes that could break the fiber, but we cannot break the fiber. So as a result, what happens? Fiber is like a capsule. Like when you prescribe medication and that's a capsule, the real medication is inside the capsule. Fiber is like that capsule. That capsule goes in, we chew it, we take it down, it goes to stomach, it gets mixed with our acid, and then it goes down into the intestines where these bacteria help us take that fiber out, and then we are able to digest our food. This way, we do not get a spike in glucose out of the uh, glucose that is naturally present in these carbohydrates. That is the reason why these carbohydrates, when they're taken with the fiber, is very, very useful for our bodies, because then there is nothing like glucose, by the way, for our body. That is the energy That is a source of energy for our body. Our body converts other nutrients into glucose for it to be efficiently, because it's one of the most efficient fuels for our cells. So please understand that I'm not against carbohydrates. I'm against bread. I'm against these refined rice. I'm against these refined grains that are being sold in the supermarkets as healthy. They are not healthy. Okay, there are 262 names of the sugar, by the way, that the sugar industry has created in order to confuse us into believing that they're selling us a good thing. They are not. Only 30% of the diet in America, and now unfortunately in other parts of the world also, is pure. And we gotta look for that. Otherwise, we will be losing. Now, I can tell you one thing as a doctor. I don't know how long God has given you on this earth, but I for sure would love to see you living on this earth, whatever your predestined time is, healthy and happy. And a body that's not healthy is not happy. It has certain hormonal changes that affect your brain, that makes you depressed, you're down, all that happens, and we don't even know what's happening with us. And unfortunately, our medical community, which I'm part of it, is not helping you. I'm sorry, but that's how it is. So keep that in mind. Look for pure fruits and vegetables on carbohydrate side. Look for pure meats that do not have those white lines, marbles, what we call marbleization of the meat, because that meat is bad. That means that the animal has in the muscles fat, which is because that animal was fed corn instead of being fed a regular grass or other nutrients that the animals eat. These animals are at the mercy of us. We feed them corn because we want them to grow fast. And then we want our meats to be marbleized. And as a result, when that meat goes in our body, that meat is carrying trans fats, it's carrying all sorts of troubles for us. And then people wonder what's going on. Well, that's what is going on. And I tell you today, I take this opportunity, Nair Bhai, to tell my brothers and sisters and people that are listening. We spend money for cars. We want one of the best cars for us. We want nice clothes for us, right? But whenever it comes to the food, we want the cheapest food. And yet, out of the priority, it's like the priority should be food and a car, which is you could buy even an old car and could take you point A to point B. You could buy, less than dazzling clothes. And yet, if you are good, healthy, those clothes will look good at you. And who cares about the car? So my advice to you guys would be, I know the food is expensive, but I tell you, you gotta eat healthy. If you will eat healthy, I assure you 80% of these medical issues that you see today, including, here you go, diabetes, hypertension, hyperlipidemia, osteoarthritis, sleep apnea, depression, chronic kidney disease, heart disease, all that would come to control, okay? All that will come to control. But we gotta understand, and we gotta understand what we're eating. We gotta go and buy things that are healthy. That is why when people ask me, what is my goal of the food, and I say simple. That goal is that this is a modified keto diet, which was meant to be always for us when our ancestors roamed on this earth and they lived with that kind of food. They didn't have any fridge. They didn't have freezers. They didn't have those middle aisles in the supermarket. They went, they bought their things on that day, they cooked it that day, and that's the end of it. Okay?